Hi everyone! I wanted to talk to you today about the Works Cited page and in-text citation and show you how properly formatting the Works Cited page can help you use proper in-text citation. So first of all, let's look at this chart. This is from the MLA Handbook, the 8th edition, which is the most current. And we're going to look at these elements that go in a Works Cited list. Now, if you don't have access to an element in this list, you just eliminate it. First, there's the author. The title of the source could be like the title of an article or a short story. The title of a container. We don't always use this, but this would refer to something like an anthology. So say the Norton Introduction to Literature, that would be the container that holds many short stories inside it. So here would go that title, the Norton Introduction to Literature, and if you were referring to a particular story within that anthology, you'd put the name of the short story as the title of the source. Other contributors refer to editors. The version number refers to the edition number, so that might be the 4th edition. You'd include that. Number refers to volume number, and that's not something we always use. Publisher could be someone like Random House. The publication date is the most recent date the book was published, or year. And the location refers to page numbers that you've drawn the material from. So let's look at an example. And I'm using the book They Say, I Say by Gerald Graff for these examples. So here I've put in the information of that same list of elements, and I've put in the information that I have. So this was written by Gerald Graff and 2 other authors, so that suffix goes after it, et al., which represents there are at least 2 more authors to the book. The title is They Say, I Say with readings. It's the 4th edition. This is the publisher name and the publication year. And here's what the completed Works Cited entry looks like after combining those elements. Notice we have this indentation on the second line and after of each Works Cited entry. That's called hanging indentation. And what that enables readers to do is if they see in your citation within your essay that you're referring to Graff, it makes these sections stick out a little bit so they're more readable. So they can go right to it and say, oh, there's Graff, and this is the book that the person's referring to for the quote. So I wanted to direct your attention to this first one in reference to an indirect quote. So when someone's using an indirect quote, for example, Gerald Graff, let me show you an example of this in his book here. So let's move this, perhaps. Here is a page from They Say, I Say, and Gerald Graff is speaking. However, he uses an example from George Orwell. So he's quoting from George Orwell, but it's an indirect quote because it's within his own essay. So in this case, this is what the Works Cited entry would look like. And here's an example, or 2 examples actually here, of how you could correctly use the in-text citation for an indirect quote. So here's the first example. In Gerald Graff's book, They Say, I Say, he notes the importance of being able to first summarize the opposing argument and notes the essay Politics and the English Language, where George Orwell is able to do just that. Orwell states that most people who bother with the matter at all would admit the English language is in a bad way, but it is generally assumed that we cannot, by conscious action, do anything about it. So here, the writer has introduced the name of the book and also the name of the article within the book. There's no need for extra information in the citation because we already know where the source is right here. It's been obviously introduced. So all that is needed is the page number. However, if you do not introduce this information beforehand, it changes the citation. So here we have an example, The Politics of the English Language. Now that's the name of the article, but not the author, right? presents the opposing argument first when it says that most people who bother with the matter at all would admit that the English language is in a bad way, etc. Now, since we don't know the author where this quote comes from, we need to include it here. But it's not just in Graff's book, it's an indirect quote within his book from George Orwell. So in that case, we're going to say quoted in Graff, and we'll know that Graff is quoting somebody else in this instance, and we can refer to that page number and find out who it was if it wasn't introduced beforehand, as in this example. So next, let's look at quoting from an article within a collection. So here, let's look at this entry. So this is also They Say, I Say. This is an article by Sean Blanda. So this is part of a collection of articles that Graff includes in They Say, I Say. So in this instance, it's Blanda's name here under author. The title of the source is the name of Blanda's article. However, the title of the container is They Say, I Say with readings. That's where it comes from. So this changes the way that you cite it. And we look at this example. In his article, The Other Side is Not Dumb, Sean Blanda presents the idea of false consensus bias. And we have the quote. Since we already have this information here, we do not need any information about the author in the citation. We only need the page number. However, in the second example, it says false consensus bias is often manifested when we see TV ratings or in politics. So in this case, we don't know who the author is. The author of this statement is Blanda. Now, it doesn't say anything about Graff, and this article is in Graff's book, so how do we know that? We know that because when we go to the works cited and go find Blanda, right up here, we see that the container of the article is They Say, I Say with readings. So here's the author, here's the name of the article, but here's the book that it came from. So I know this can be very confusing at first, and it takes a while to get used to. And the hard part is, depending on the source, there are so many ways to structure works cited and in-text citation at times, so it can be difficult. But keep working on it. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. You're welcome to even send me samples of your citations and find out if they're correct before you submit them to your assignment box. So let me know if you need any more help, and I hope this helps you.